this is Monica and I have another tutorial using supplies from my friends at BeeBeeCraft.com. This is going to be the final tutorial for the beading haul that I had a few months ago, and in light of the tariff situation, they are not able to ship the way that they once were, so we're kind of in a holding pattern on that, but I'll be sure to update any of the link information to the tariff policies that they have on their website as far as what they're trying to do with them, the pricing and things for shipping to the US, and hopefully all of this will change soon. Otherwise, I'm sorry guys. I have some of these shell inlay beads, and then it's the resin and shell inlaid mixture beads here, and I'm going to use some of these little beads that I got as well. They have the pretty blue and kind of a gray and brown and tan cream colors there, so I'm going to put all of that together from what I got in BeeBeeCraft in the haul. But as you see, I have a ton of other beads because I pulled a lot of those colors together from other things that I had in my stash, and I just thought it looked so pretty I was going to take a picture. But I actually may incorporate like some of these lampwork glass beads that I've got, some of these in the mix, and then I have some Czech glass beads that I've got over here, so I may kind of incorporate some of that along with these glass pearls that I have. Just depends on where I go with this, but I am going to use some toggle clasps in order to make a bracelet, and I may actually create a necklace. I'm going to be using some bead stringing wire here, which is a nylon coated stainless steel, and this is the 7 strand, so there's 7 strands that are compressed here together in this silver look of the stainless steel. This is just like the more economic roll. If you want to have a little bit more flexibility, you can do a 19 strand or the 49 strand, because I use that a lot in the soft flex beading wire, but it's up to you if you want some color on your beading wire, or if you just want the regular stainless steel look, that's fine too. It will kink up on you if you're rough with your jewelry. I would recommend using the 19 or the 49 strand. Now the 19 and the 49 strand are a little bit more expensive. If you are like you play sports, or you just kind of have a tendency to be rough housing with your jewelry, or you just take your jewelry off and kind of sling it. I hope you don't do that, but if you do, the 7 strand might not be for you, so make sure that you upgrade your beading wire if you need to. I'll also need some size 2 crimp tubes, and I like to use the tubes because they have a longer length in order to hold the beading wire when I use my crimping tool. And the crimp bead is just like a little tiny thing that I can usually use for my illusion necklaces, where I just need to tack, and I'm not worried that I need to actually fold and crimp and hold like a folded piece of wire. Crimp tubes for me feel like it's more secure, and I typically always use those. Tool wise, speaking of crimps, I'll be using my crimping pliers, my bent nose pliers, which looks like a crooked finger, my flat nose pliers, and my flush cutters. If I make some earrings, which I probably will, I'll also be using my round nose pliers to help me to do that. So if you want to measure for a bracelet, use one of those flexible tape measures. If you don't have a flexible tape measure though, you can always use like a piece of string or ribbon, because if you're like me, you got ribbon everywhere. This will help you just to kind of get it around your wrist. You've got the 0 here. I want to go all the way around my wrist, and I want to get it tight so that I'm actually looking at a true measurement, and there's the 0. So that for me is going to be 6 3/4 of an inch, just about. I had 6 3/4 of an inch. So when I'm actually doing my bead stringing wire, I always like to give myself an extra 2 inches on each side as far as being able to crimp off and add into the mix my clasp, whatever mechanism I'm using. So that just gives me a little bit more wiggle room. Also, if I'm using like larger size beads versus the smaller size, like anything that's 8mm or less, then I want to give myself even more of that wire, because the bead tension is going to require that I have a little bit more wire, because it's going to be a little bit more tight. So you've got a lot of things to think about. You always want to have too much versus not enough of your stringing material. Unless you're talking about precious metals or, you know, something really expensive in your stringing materials, I always just prefer to give myself a little bit extra. You know, I mean, don't give yourself like 18 feet because then it'll just be in your way, but you know, within reason. So 2 to 3 additional inches on each side of a bracelet would be fine. And I do the same thing for like the necklace as well. A lot of times, especially if I'm using my bracelet board, I will just go ahead and put like the lobster clasp and the split ring side by side, because sometimes I might be using a larger than usual lobster claw clasp or a smaller one. So I just put them side by side, and then that gives me the total in inch or almost of an inch that I might need to have in just the clasping mechanism. With a toggle clasp, it's a little bit different because you have your round piece and then you have the bar, and the bar is going to rest there in the center of the round piece. So this is not going to be like this for you to measure. It's actually going to be full on like right here in the center. You're just looking really at the round piece as far as the additional length. So in this regard, I think this is probably a little bit over a half of an inch. I'm going to lay it down here on my measuring board because it's going to move around within the center to this loop right here, which is going to actually be on the bead stringing wire. I would give myself almost a full inch in just the clasp size here as far as the total length of the bracelet. We're going to measure out some wire now. 6 3/4 inch is not what I want to make my actual bracelet. I like to go in between like 7.25 up to 7.75 in my actual bracelet sizing, because I do like a little bit of wiggle room. I don't like it really tight on my wrist. And then also, if you have arthritis or any kind of swelling issues, you don't want to have something that's going to become tight over the course of the day. But you don't want something so loose that, you know, you're going to be moving around and you're easily going to sling it off, so you got to be mindful of that. So I'm going to think in terms of a 7.5, which is actually your standard size anyway for most people in the bracelet length. And because I like to have the additional inches on each side of my bracelet for some beadwork and clasping mechanisms, then I'll put 4 inches onto that 7.5, which is going to give me 11.5, or you could just say an even 12 inches. So again, I'm going to measure on my little table here to the 12 inches and then cut that off with my flush cutters. So now I have 12 inches of bead stringing wire for a bracelet. I'm going to get 2 of these crimp tubes and I'm going to put on one side of my toggle, so I'll have one part of my bracelet ready to go. Now a lot of people prefer not to do that because they want to be able to take their beads off and on. I don't operate that way. I like to go ahead and get one side of my bracelet or my necklace, whatever I'm creating, finished, so that actually acts as a bead stopper and it's already finished for one side. And also I prefer to utilize the bead design board so that I can create the design and I can change that design while it's on my board. And then once I've decided, yes, that's exactly how I want to do it, then I can go ahead and feed it onto my wire, which is already finished off on one side. So you put on your crimp tube first, and if you're doing a crimp bead, you're going to be doing that. And because I'm folding this over, that is another reason why you give yourself a couple of extra inches on both sides of your bracelet. Boy, I'm having a hard time seeing. It's late at night, guys. I'm sorry. And I use my thumbnail to kind of help me push that crimp tube up towards whatever I've got that's on the loop. So your crimp goes on first, then you put on your clasping mechanism to make the loop to go back through the crimp. You do not want your wire to cross. You want it to be side by side, so it's going to be parallel just like this, because when we crimp it, then each side of the wire is going to be in the fold of the sandwich, so to speak. That's what I refer to it as. And it's not going to cross over and be sawing into each other over the course of time. So you want to just make sure that you have it side by side. Keeping your thumbnail on there really does the trick. I usually have like a 1/4 of an inch loop left, and also it depends on how thick that loop of my toggle is, and this one's kind of thick, so I might actually nudge that down just another hair so I've got a little bit over a 1/4 of an inch of a loop, because when you go to crimp this with your crimping pliers, that process of crimp is actually going to minimize the loop size. So on the crimping plier, you've got several little notches here, and I use it twice. I don't do it the 3 times. Different people have different techniques. You can see on your actual packaging when you purchase your very first one, it may offer you the 3 crimp technique. I just do the 2. So first you want to go to the very back notch of your plier. It's the U shape, and you're going to give it a squeeze, and it creates a U-shaped little divot. And then you're going to go to the front of your plier, which is this little oval shape right here. So you're on either side of that U that you just made, and you're going to give that a crimp so it closes the sandwich, because now both sides of that are side by side. And I like to come over here either with my bent nose pliers or my flat nose pliers and just give it another squeeze. That way I'm sure that that is nice and crimped and it is compact. It's not going to have any kind of problem. Nothing's going to be jutting out. And I still have freedom of movement. It's not so tight on the toggle clasp that it's going to cause any kind of hardness or like, you know, the thing just always sticking straight out, because you don't want it to be taut. Some people don't find this step necessary, but if you're selling your jewelry or you just want a more finished professional look to it, I would recommend using crimp covers. Now, crimp covers are just to camouflage what I just did in the crimp, and you can do that over a crimp bead or a crimp tube. You want to be sure that you're using a large enough crimp cover to cover what you've just crimped, because if you use too small of one, and maybe you're doing like a multi-strand bracelet and you're using like a size 3 or 4 crimp tube, then it will not cover. So you want to be sure that you get that to where it's actually going to cover and not create a problem. Now, sometimes you might have a problem where the crimp is not open all the way. It looks like a little Pac-Man, and so what I like to do is just take my round nose pliers, because it's a little U-shape and it's curved, and this round nose pliers goes perfectly in there, and I just give it like a little squeeze. That way I'm sure that it opens it up just a little bit more. That way I can easily slide my crimp in there. Now, I call this a sandwich, so I say the sandwich side up, and then I put the rounded side to the back within the U shape of the crimp cover, and then it's easy to come over top and close the crimp cover. So I use my bent nose pliers for this step. I just come over and give it a squeeze. You're not flattening this crimp cover. You're just trying to get that to close and look like a rounded bead. Sometimes you might have to come over on the top just a little bit. Again, you're not flattening this, but you don't want to see that crimp, because if you leave it open, it might snag your shirt sleeves and stuff. You want to give the illusion like it's just a round bead on the end. So there we go. There's my little crimp cover. It's all closed up. Now, at this point, I just kind of lay this off to the side because I've got a big mishmash of beads, and I'm not sure yet what I'm going to do as far as the pattern. So I got some little pearlized seed beads here. These are the 8/0, so they're kind of big, and I'm going to have that to end the design. So that's the only bead that you haven't seen yet. But otherwise, I have my design here on my little board, and that's going to give me 6.5 inches. So by the time that I have this almost inch, that should give me 7.5 inches total. If I need to add additional space, I could just have like an extender situation for the toggle, but I think that I have sized this appropriately, so we should be good to go. Now I'm going to go ahead and feed on the beads. What I like to do is cover the tail. I don't cut my tail off at the crimp cover because I like to have a little bit of added strength on both ends of my pieces. And I just feel like it gives me a little bit more durability on the edges, so I just cover it up with the beads. Now, something to be mindful with if you're going to do this method where you're covering up the tail with your beads, are that your beads actually have to have holes large enough to go over 2 strands of the wire together. So here, I think I need to kind of open up the coating on this pearl a little bit. So I'm just going to kind of turn it around, and that's still not wanting to come through that pearl. So I might take a bead reamer just on the very tip because I don't want to scratch up the bead. I'm just going to lightly turn that on both sides of the hole. Sometimes the coating for these pearls can cover the hole up a little bit, because the hole itself is a good size hole, so I shouldn't have any problem with it covering the tail now. Just want to be sure that you don't scratch your beads if you're doing that. There we go. Alright, so now I'm going to finish with my pattern that I've laid out and come back once I get that done so I can show you how to crimp the other side. So I have all of the beads on to the bead stringing wire along with one side of my toggle already done. All of the beads are over here to the very edge of where I've got that crimp cover, so I don't have any gaps or anything. Right now is my last opportunity to test it on my wrist just to be sure that I have sized it appropriately for myself, and I've just got my finger holding the place of that seed bead, and then when I come over here I'm envisioning that I have the bar, which is the other side, and you'll see that by the time, because it's going to be loose like it will be on this side here with that 1/4 of the inch of the loop with the bead stringing wire, that should give me plenty of room as far as the sizing and the bead tension that I have, because some of these beads are a little bit larger than the 8mm size. So I will have plenty of room because that bar will go into the toggle and it's going to still have a little bit of wiggle room for me. I'm putting on the crimp tube again, and I'm going to let it slide all the way down, and then I'm going to put on the other part of the toggle clasp, which is the bar, and it's this cute little flower. So I'm going to come down here to where I'm at the seed bead, and you see I've got all of this additional wire. Now if I had like too much wire, like a big huge mess, then that's going to be a lot to have to go through the crimp tube and have a big bunch that you might kink up, because this is the 7-strand wire. But this is doable right here by having the extra 2 to 3 inches on either side of the beadwork as you're operating with your clasp closures and the crimp. So I'm just going down through that crimp tube, and again I'm trying to stay parallel, so I'm staying side by side. I don't want to cross my wire. And then I like to just go ahead and go through the last couple of beads. You know, it's up to you how many you want to go through. I usually like to do like 3 or 4, and I use my bent nose pliers to help me out a little bit. I'm going to go through this blue bead. Because this is a bar, I'm able to easily take out the slack, and then I'm going to be pushing down with my thumbnail to move that crimp tube down and then pull the slack out. That way I can create this 1/4 of an inch loop. I'm not really wrestling around with this because I don't want to stretch out the loop since my wire is side by side within that crimp tube at this point. And this is going to have plenty of room to wiggle around. So now I just need to take my crimping plier and do what I did on the other side to crimp that off. Now I'm going to go here in the back channel of that crimp plier to make that U shape. Then I come over the top of it to close the sandwich by way of this front channel. I like to come on either side of the sandwich and just give it another squeeze. Just be careful you're not going to squeeze your bead there that's on the end. Then I go ahead and cut the excess tail off. I use my flush cutters with the flat part up against the bead, and I'm holding the wire up so that I can cut that off. And then if you have any like little bit of it left that's wanting to stick out, just make sure you nestle it into the bead next door. I hold it down because I need to put the crimp cover over this crimp. Gravity helps me out a little bit, and I have plenty of room for that crimp cover to go, but I need to open it up just a little bit like I did the other one. I have my round nose pliers. I'm just squeezing that a little bit just to open up that center portion. And then this is a balancing act because now you've got a bunch of beads, and I'm trying to get it to where I want the sandwich side of the crimping up and the rounded part of my Pac-Man in the back. So I've got it balanced strategically on my finger, and I'm going to come over the top of the crimp cover and just squeeze that closed with my bent nose plier until I don't have a gap. This one I don't need to, it looks like I'm good. I don't need to come over the top. Sometimes when you close these, it might look like a little bit of an egg shape at the top, so that's why you might need to come over the top and just kind of give it a light little squeeze, because ultimately you're just trying to make it look like a round bead. It's not too tight because I still have free movement here. It's not got too much of the bead tension, and I'm able to put this bar through and it still be nice and loose, but you don't have like the beads aren't moving, they're not separating, you still have good coverage, and it's nicely put together. So let's see if I can get this put on myself here. That's the next test. I have a lot more success with the toggles than I do lobster claw clasp because that is just too hard for me to do with my carpal tunnel. I may have to put the other end. Let's try the flower end because that might be easier for me to grab and send through the center. There we go. And there we have. So there's the flower toggle with the flower bar of that toggle going through there. And you can see I've got plenty of room here. Sometimes you might want to gauge if you're going to have enough room before you do that final crimp. I like to have at least 2 fingers of space so it's not too tight. And if I have any kind of swelling or anything throughout the day, I'm still going to have plenty of room without this being just tight on my wrist. It's not too loose. It has some movement for me, and I love the toggle because it makes it really pretty and feminine, romantic, and I like those colors together. So I have a little bling in the rhinestone. I've got that, some people call this like a cake bead, but it's a lampwork glass bead that's got some glittery goldness to it that coordinates well with that shell inlay of the resin bead with the turquoise resin. And then I think this is Dolomite on the blue bead. It's either that or that candy jade. I'll have to look that back up because I think I also got that at BeeBeeCraft in another haul like way back. But a lot of these beads were from other bits of my stash and I coordinated it all together and I love the look of that. That gives you the overall gist of how to do the crimping for bead wire that you're using. So that would work the same if you were going to do a necklace. With the necklace, I would actually use the lobster claw clasp and a split ring versus a toggle. Now, something that is fun that you can do, especially if you have a really pretty design like this and you want to kind of show off the toggle, especially if they're a really large toggle clasp, is you could make the toggle be the front of the necklace, and that becomes then a design element. Instead of having a pendant or a charm hanging off at the center of the necklace, just utilize your toggle to be the design element. So that is a case in which you would put a toggle on your necklace. It's just up to you, those lariat style necklaces. And then also if you're using knotted method, then you can just kind of tie it off at the back or make a sliding knot, however you are most comfortable. Now they do have those bracelet helpers, and I've got one somewhere around here where you just kind of hold the bracelet on and then you can use your other hand a little bit more freely in order to clasp that, but I still struggle with it. So I'm going to just use my one-step looping tool and make a simple loop for these earrings. So since I don't care which direction that they are as far as having it always be front facing, I am not going to be worried about that. It's moving around on my ear wire. So I'm going to put my ear wire through the hole that's here on the plier. Try to keep that seed bead out of the way of the jaws, and then give it a squeeze and it's going to make the loop. Try to keep that out of the way. I pull my earring back so that it makes a little bend like a question mark, and then normally when I'm doing this I try to also make sure that this part isn't going to fly out and hit me in the eye, but that didn't work out because I was too busy trying to hold on to the main ear wire. It was a little bit wiggly. Now this didn't close all the way. In that instance you can come in with your round nose plier and just get into the loop and pull that closed. It's closed there, and you don't have to worry that it's going to come off of your ear wire. If you want to take your bent nose pliers and give it a little squeeze, that way you're sure that there's no gap. There we go. Alright, so now I just need to get an ear wire and pop that on, and then I'll have a pair of earrings. Grab some ear wires that I got in my BeeBeeCraft kit, and then I'm going to grab a couple of the little ear stoppers and put them on the earring cards that were so cool. These are the French style ear wires. I turned mine upside down and then looked to see which side the slit is because it's not always on the same side. So I believe, yeah, it's on the internal side. I just lift up towards myself so that I can open that up. And then because it doesn't matter which way is which, I just pop that on there because it's a simple loop. It doesn't matter. I want to shut it. I call that shutting the door. And then I just give it a little squeeze to make sure that it is flush. And then there I have my little earring. So I've got one earring made. I'm going to make the other earring and then we'll put it on an earring card. I have the pattern laid out for my necklace. And this time I'm going to be using a lobster claw clasp. And I want to test it to be sure it actually works. And it does. And then I'm going to need a split ring so that the lobster claw clasp has something to grab hold of it. And the split ring just looks like a double loop loop of some wire, and it's just like a little keychain. Now in this particular instance, I would be using my handy dandy tape measure, the flexible kind, and just putting that around my neck and being able to measure how far down that I want that to actually hang on me, because we all have our different comfort levels about where we want our necklaces to hang. If you're someone that wants to have it right there on your collarbone, of course your collarbone might be different than what mine is. My neck is a little bit larger than your average neck, so it's just up to you. However you like to hang it, you will put this around your neck. The ends will be obviously on the front of you to where you can see that you're lined up in order to do your measurement, and then again you will be adding the extra wire on either side until you come up with the total measurement that you need. I typically like to go ahead and make longer necklaces, and a lot of people that request necklaces from me usually get anywhere from a 20 to like a 24 inch. So I'm starting at the 0 point of my bead board, and then you go up on each side to where you see how the beads end at the 10.5. So 10.5 and 10.5 are 21 inches. If I want to have some extra inches on the end of the 21, let's say I want the 2 inches on each side extra, that'll be 4 inches plus 21 inches will give me 25 inches of wire that I need overall in order to be able to put everything together. Now what I was talking about lining up, because this is not the same as the toggle clasp where I have the bar through the center, it's going to actually be something that is going to add some additional length in the way of like a straight line length, I guess is the way to put that. So that's about 3/4 of an inch right there from the center of this lobster claw and the center of the loop for the split ring. So I would just go ahead and say like 1/4 of an inch length is what I would be incorporating into the overall length of my bead stringing wire. But because I'm giving myself the extra 4 inches, I don't have to worry about any of that running out, and I already know that my bead tension for these particular beads will be on par with the type of bead stringing material that I'm using, so I'm good to go. So 25 inches it is. I'm going to be doing the same process with the crimping, except this will be the lobster and the split ring, but it's the same scenario as how you saw me do it on the toggle. Something I forgot to mention, when you're actually laying out your pattern on your bead board in front of you, keep in mind that if you're a left hand or a right hand person and you're using these lobster claw clasps, because you're going to be getting hold of the little prong mechanism here in order to take this off of your neck and put it on your neck. If you have any dexterity problems or whatnot, I'm a right-handed person, so I always like to be able to put my necklaces on and take them off with my right hand. So what I usually do is, just as a reminder of that, especially if I have a pendant, is I go ahead and I lay my lobster claw clasp on the side that I want it. Let's pretend like we've got a pendant hanging off here. On the left side of the board is my lobster claw clasp. Well, if I wanted to have the pendant on my chest front facing so that people looking at me could see it, I want to pick up my necklace and then turn it around, because now since I'm right-handed, I can grab hold of my lobster claw clasp and put it on my body, grabbing hold of the split ring without any problems, and my pendant is front facing so that someone in front of me looking towards me is going to see the front of the necklace, and I'm not going to have that on backwards because of my right hand, especially with dexterity issues. That matters a lot to me. If you're making them to sell, be mindful of it, because a lot of people will have that issue. Here is my earring card. I'm going to use this one. It's kind of a boho chic looking deal. I'm going to put one in here, one on the other side, then we're going to turn it to the back and grab my little earring stopper. There's one. Alright, so now I have the earrings on a card. They are on the stoppers, that way they don't come off the card, especially if you're going to have this like in a boutique or you're selling it at a craft fair. There's some earrings, and then I have the bracelet. So this might just be a little bit over 21-inch necklace. Now if you're someone that wants a 24-inch necklace or something, you might want to consider using some chain on the back portion of the necklace, because it's something that's going to be on the back side of your neck anyway. Some people do like the feel of the beads on the back of their neck, but I like this 21-inch size for me, and then if I needed to do an extender, I could add that on, or if I wanted to have some chain to like change the style of the necklace up, then I could do that. So this is my jewelry set, creating with items from my bead stash along with items that I received from BeeBeeCraft.com. A lot of my usual beading supplies suppliers are really struggling right now because they curate a lot of their designs and kits and things that they put together for us using supplies from overseas. So whether that's, China or India or other places, they put kits or like themes together. Some just, source the gemstones or the crystals or whatever, the Czech glass from overseas. Czech glass beads are actually becoming more expensive and a little bit harder to get access to because they also would be coming to the U.S. with the tariff situation. So it's a little bit difficult for everybody right now, but as I get more information, I'll be sure to update in my description boxes as I move forward with additional videos, and hopefully we'll be out of the woods on this before too awful long. If you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up and share this with any of your jewelry making friends that might be interested in jewelry making supplies from BeeBeeCraft. If you've not already subscribed to my channel, please do so, and as always, thank you so much for watching. Have a sparkle-rific day, y'all.